Hey everyone, welcome to yet another very interesting episode of the Blue Mug Chat. So happy to be back with all of you. Our today's topic of conversation is generational empathy, which relates to generation gap. And I can bet that today's talk will resonate across all age groups out there because we all struggle with that generation gap. Before we dig too deep into the conversation, I just wanted to share how the generations are categorized because some of them I was not aware of myself. So anyone born before mid 1940s are termed as traditionals. From mid 1940s to mid 60s are of course baby boomers. Then from mid 1960s to mid 80s are of course Generation X, which is my generation. And then there are millennials. The millennials again are Generation Y and Generation Z. It looks like I'm taking a maths session, but I'm not. So don't exit the talk show. I am coming to the point. Well, one other thing that I also found while getting into this conversation was that millennials are also termed as technological natives, and our generation is called uh, digital immigrants, which I think is fair enough because if you see most of the boom, whether it was technology, whether it was globalization, economy, everything happened during our generation. And that's why somewhere I feel that, our generation has its foot on two different boats, metaphorically speaking, of course, drifting in two different directions. And we are kind of that wedged generation because we see the value in traditional India, but we also see the value in global India. And we are a bit confused bunch. Having said that, I think both the baby boomers and our generation, thanks to our resilience, we have been able to internalize this radical shift in a pretty balanced way. Having said that, we still struggle, with the millennials about our culture, about our value system, about communication, whether it's home, whether it's school, whether it's corporate. So we have just the right person with us today, Nija Singh, who is going to sail us through most of these issues. She is an author, she is a professional speaker, she is a team mentor. So let me bring her with us on the studio. Let me introduce her to all of you, and then let's move on. Hi, Nija. Welcome to the Blue Mug Chat. I see you have a white cup there. Going very well with your background. Welcome to the chat show.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you very much. And
please.
I was going to say that this is very exciting because this is my favorite subject. It's something that's really preoccupied me for a long time now. And I'm constantly reading, writing, and talking wherever there's an opportunity on the generational empathy, is how I put it. How can two generations empathize better with each other? And the fact that the need for empathy has never been greater, because the conflicts are at a far more fundamental level than they've ever been before. A lot of people say, Sonal, that generation gap is just one of those things, but not the current generation gap. No, it's not one of those things.
It's
yes,
quite
I believe.
wide. Yeah, it's and it actually affects all aspects of life. I feel even our daily interactions with them. Actually, it's because we always seem to be on two different pages, and sometimes it's very difficult to bridge that gap. And that's where you come in. I'm going to introduce you. Actually, let me just give you a formal introduction to all of you so that they know, your professional legacy as well. So, Nija Singh is the senior teenager, she calls herself. She considers herself a millennial in spirit with the benefit of hindsight. I love that line. A professional speaker on generational issues with 37 years of work and life experience as an advertising executive, prize-winning fiction writer, feature journalist, teacher, documentary script writer, director, TV anchor, and a professional columnist, she addresses India's never-before generation gap. So that's a lovely introduction. Nita, to get into the conversation, you call yourself a teenager, which I think is a quite an interesting identifier for yourself. So why are you a teenager? Please explain
Right. So, no, so the I have to, credit my friend, my golf buddy. I don't know if she's watching it. Her name is Payal Soni. She's the one who first used this word teenager, and it just appealed to me so much. I just caught onto it because it resonated. And the reason I call myself a teenager is because I have shared experiences with the boomers, and I'm at home with the zoomers. Zoomers are the Generation Z, because because of my activities, Sonal, because of the things I'm constantly doing. So if I'm learning social dancing, for instance, or if I'm learning Spanish, my classmates are 19-year-old or 20-year-old, 21-year-old. So I'm constantly interacting with the young generation because I believe that the onus on my generation is to stay relevant to the lives of our younger generation. We can't afford anymore, like our parents were able to say that we've done, हमने roti pakana sikha diya, career bana diya, now we can step back. It doesn't seem to work like that. And so teenager is a senior teenager, and at home with the millennials and with the zoomers and with the boomers, that's my generation. So I'm a senior teenager. Yes.
Perfect, perfect. It suits you. It suits you well, I can say. Now, so Nietzsche, there are various aspects of generation gap, and I think according to your book, you have actually covered 30 different aspects. But because of the limitation on the time, what are the five revolutions that our current generation is facing that also affects our culture and value system? So, the core generational gap issues.
Hmm.
In your
So
opinion,
see, right. This is the book I wrote, covering 30 different aspects of generation gap. What is happening, Sonal, today in our country? There are five revolutions going on, and I'm not saying this. Ramchandra Guha, the historian, noted historian, said this. There's a national revolution. There's a democratic revolution. There is a cultural revolution. There is a social revolution. There's a At the core, the country is kind of being shaken up, and it's affecting the social values are the ones that are affecting the generations the most, because they affect your belief system, your daily life choices, how you the paths that you choose, how you express yourself, primarily the choices that you make. That is where I think the tussle between the generations is. And you started out by saying something very striking about today's parents have actually lost their parental authority. The environment is such, it's denuded us of any semblance, any pretense at any authority with our children. So we are responsible for the consequences, sometimes of our children's actions, without the authority that used to go with it once upon a time. Once upon a
so
time,
true.
the parents knew the best, the teachers knew the best, but now the child knows the best. So the child is deciding what car brand, what color, what embroidery, sometimes what suit, what food, what takeaway. These are choices that the children are making, and parents like us are happy to empower our children. But sometimes what's happening is that in the process of empowering, we are ending up enabling the children. We are not able to draw the boundary. And we are very, very, I think we are a generation very frightened of being unpopular with our children. We don't want our children to dislike us. We want to be popular with our children. We want to be friends with our children. We don't have it in us to just put our foot down sometimes and say, no, this is not going to work out, because the environment has us confused. The environment, and the environment is telling you, Sonal, you must be a progressive parent. Nirja, you must be open. You must be inclusive. And you getting so liberal, so liberal, so liberal, is getting just impossible to call a spade anymore. So what are you going to say? A triangular shaped object made of iron that can be stuck into the mud. I mean, how politically correct will you have
That's
to
so
be?
true.
So what you're doing, what you and I are doing today, and many of our friends and people who are watching this show, we are walking on eggshells around our children, literally on eggshells. You are overthinking what you're going to say, the words you will choose. You don't want to cause them any damaged. You don't want them ending up in therapy. You don't want them to drag you to therapy at any point later in life, and that can happen. It's a possibility today. So, again, to answer your question, the fundamental revolution is at a social cultural level, the one that's shaking us the most.
Yeah, absolutely
Yes,
right.
Sunil.
So, you actually raised a very, very valid point that we all come across almost on a daily basis as to, we are literally walking on eggshells, right? Now, where do you draw the line? So, on one hand, today, yes, we are empowering them, but on the other hand, like you said, uh, some element of discipline also has to come in, and we are almost losing that power. How do you bridge that gap? Is there a or is there a way, or have you completely lost the battle?
I think that this generation of parents is caught at the cusp of a major change, and the only thing that you can strive to maintain and that will see you through all these storms is that connection with your child. It's ultimately boils down to that. How do you maintain that connection with a child? That will be your child's literally savior, because what's happening, Sonal, is that it's not just the father, and I say it over and over again whenever I talk about this, that today a child is being brought up by four parents. There is a mother, there is a father, there is a YouTube, and there is the peer. So it's not just the father and the mother who are bringing up the child. No, no,
Okay,
you're mistaken if you think
true.
that's the case. And the minute that smartphone is handed to a child, 10, 11, 12, whatever the ages, 14, 15, you're literally exposing that child to a world which you would not dream of doing in the physical world. You wouldn't let your child out in the wilderness, in reality. But you have done it the minute you've handed him the smartphone, because you have no clue where all the child is roaming on the digital highways. There's an entire world out there. And you started by saying that these are digital natives. Children are very quick. It doesn't take too much. It's just a couple of buttons, couple of clicks, and you're out there, completely exposed. And the best part is that the parent doesn't know where the child is going. And sometimes, I feel so strange, Sonal, when somebody says, or is your daughter home? Is your child home? And I say, yes, my child is home, but actually my child is not at home. My
Not at
child is
home,
physically at home,
physically at home.
physically at
So,
home, but but could be anywhere. There's a whole world out there. And you'll find another phenomena. I'm not You may have experienced it, some of the viewers may have experienced it. I would love them to corroborate what I'm saying. More and more children spend their time alone in their rooms with the door shut. Now, why? They're not alone in those rooms. They're not alone. They are there, I mean, out there, literally out there. So, how do you say that, Sonal, your child, this percentage of your child has been influenced by Sonal, parented by Sonal, and this percentage of your child has been parented by maybe a digital guru, online people who are who have their views and their values that they are spouting, and you have no knowledge of, no influence over that. But but when to put it very crudely, when it hits the ceiling, and that is when the primary support system kicks in, and that primary support system is the parents. Even today, especially in India, all friends, all support systems will just vanish like that should there be a crisis. So it's a very delicate situation, and the only thing we can do is try and maintain that connection with the child, because the and also, Sonal, not to be surprised, not to be shocked, not to be scared, not to judge, and I would say to any parent today, be prepared for surprises. Be prepared for surprises. Yes.
one of the other things that I think we struggle on is that this generation has passion. They bring in the drive. They're risk takers. But what the older generation brings in is the experience and the wisdom. And how do we make the millennials receptive of this communication, that there is value to that wisdom and experience, which sometimes they are so defiant about? So how do you communicate that? How do you make them receptive about that?
Right. So, like I said, that we have to be prepared, I think, adults today for surprises. And it may just happen that you will probably have to accept that your millennial is not open to your suggestions. However, there are enough and more millennials out there who are actually doing something called reverse mentoring. So they are mentoring boomer like this, and in India they're called the pre-cablers, and vice versa. I myself am in. I've been mentored by a 35-year-old, a 35-year-old, a 42-year-old. I've had coaches who have been younger to me, so it's not as though all millennials are not cognizant of the value of intergenerational communication or guidance. Many of them are. They're smart, but like I said, that it's not something that can be taken for granted anymore. You have to work at it. In fact, the earlier generation has to step out now and not expect the younger generation to come to them. The older ones, the bosses included, superiors included, the directors and the HR managers and the CEOs, them included. It's now the onus is on them to step up and meet the younger generation more than halfway, because that connection, you cannot afford to lose that connection with the young. So that is something that's something that has to be constantly. I think one has to be alert to that, and it's a constant process.
So you have to step out and reach out to them with proper connection, with proper communication, and that's, I think that's again, that bridge also sometimes is very, very shaky, because at times they may not even be open for communication. But I guess, like you said, it's a constant process, almost an everyday process, I would say.
It's a process, especially the earlier years, when they're younger. If at that time you're able to get into the trenches with them, be part of their music, be part of whatever they're watching, they're more susceptible to your involvement when they're younger. Once they hit their teen years, then that desire for autonomy is very strong. They want to individuate from you, and they're depending so much more on their peers. But at the earlier stage, when they're younger, if that connection you're able to establish at that stage, that will be there. There will be topsy turvies. It will be tumultuous. There'll be storms, but it will. My belief is that it will survive, because a child, no matter what, does understand at a very deep level that he or she is loved by the parent, provided that initial connection has been there. So I think the initial years are very, 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 very critical, very crucial. That is a time, like I said, to get into the trenches with them, to spend time with them. Unfortunately, many of us are not able to do that. Have our jobs, we don't have the time. But those crucial years are the ones when they need to have those memories that you were around them. Many of us, for instance, even I haven't done that. I stopped cooking quite early on. I think there is some truth in cooking for the children. These are little things, the smells, the taste. These are things that stays with them all their lives, and especially during the difficult times. These are the memories that you can perhaps. It's your emotional bank account that you keep with your children, and then you draw upon it whenever you're required to do that, because a lot of children these days, teenagers, young adults, they hit crisis points, and some of them are very, very painful crisis points. It can throw a family into disarray, complete disarray. So the people struggling, don't know, not knowing where to go, and who to talk to, what to do, how to handle this. And you have cases of mental health problems, mental sickness, depression, all kinds of things, because of this dissonance between the generations. Yes.
That's true. One of the generation Y, especially, not so much the generation Z, they've also been a part of the economic wave that India experienced, and so they are more, they have more. synchronize themselves with the westernized, individualistic, and capitalistic point of view and values, which does not sync in with our core culture and value. So there's always that gap also. How do we bridge that gap with the generation Y especially?
Sonal, what's happening now is that I think we've gone over that high, that ascent, and now we are coming down because the Generation Z, the current one, 95 onwards, children born 95 onwards, they are they've seen the millennials uh, being made fun of. They've seen the millennials being called a snowflake generation. They've seen what the entrepreneurs like Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, and they've seen what their actions have led to, the kind of consequences. So more and more young people today, I think, are more minimalist. The younger generation now is not
That's
as
the generation. Yes, yes, I agree.
they're not- yes, and they're concepts like slow fashion. They don't. My own daughters are like that. They don't like to spend too much on clothes. They will. They'll probably be happy living on a hill, on a farmhouse. Um, you'll find a lot of young people today just wanting to do organic farming, for instance. The parent may have sent them to IIT or some such IIM and have all these notions of them making a multi-millionaire or kind of a package per annum, but you find the child actually wants to do organic farming or just wants to write or be a scuba diver instructor or this thing of whatever makes you happy. So there are a whole lot of parents who are perplexed. They don't know why their child doesn't want to buy a car or why their child doesn't want to invest in a home, for instance. In fact, and a lot of young people not wanting to get married also, or if they're married, not wanting to have children. So that's perhaps they've seen the excesses of the earlier generation. They've seen what the excesses have has done to the environment. That greed, the greed, the greed that just goes on and on and on, and you just keep consuming, and you hit a point where it stops to make sense anymore. And also remember, Sonal, that this generation is actually the first generation in the history of mankind in a real danger of losing the planet. There's a real danger of some. We're already seeing it. We're seeing it. So it's the first generation, and they're facing it right up front. So for them, it's scary. It's scary, and they see people like again. I'll we are on Facebook Live, but it's a you're talking about community, and yet elections are there's a well let me put it like that: the crisis of trust, that you cannot trust a bank anymore, you cannot trust an organization anymore, you cannot trust a government anymore. So this generation is dealing with issues of this nature, which my generation never had to deal with. We led a pretty secure life. There weren't that many anxieties. But if you were to ask a young person today, they're anxious about the climate. That was the furthest thing from our mind. We were not anxious about the climate at all. But this generation is. The information is more, the exposure is more, they're reading, they're watching. Even if they don't read the newspaper, they're reading the news on BuzzFeed or on their smartphone. They're getting the news updates. So they know what's happening in the United States, or what's happening in how a democracy is being sold, or how countries or elections are being sold. These are things that they are aware of. So to answer your question, you said, how do you hit a balance between the consumerism? I think we've gone over that cycle now. In fact, now we are at a stage where most young people would rather be minimalist, wear slow fashion, be more real, be more authentic, be and also Sunil, their bullshit meter is much
It's
finer, yeah, tuned.
much finer.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they're far finer. So they can tell like that you're bullshitting. So I think that's a good sign. That's a good sign. Uh, yeah, but again, as a generation, I do feel, Sonal, to share this, that I've always felt that it's every generation's mandate to leave the next one more productive, more potent, and more progressive, more prosperous than them. See, with every generation, my parents wanted to leave us better off than them. Their parents wanted to leave them better off than them. But today, I feel that my generation is probably the first generation that's not too sure that we are going to leave behind a generation that is better off than us, or healthier than us, or happier or more prosperous than us. And that's a little it's sad. It's it's painful if that is the case, or time will tell. Time will tell. I don't know if I'm being alarmist, but this is my personal sentiment, my personal view. I do feel at times, am I leaving behind a generation that's going to be better off than I was? I do wonder at times. And there's so many multitude of aspects, Sonal. There is your there's your feminism, the glass ceiling that you broke. There is a sexual revolution. You say that our lives were, perhaps the younger generation at one time felt that we compromised, or we lived safe lives. But then at my age, I'm perhaps healthier. I can, we physically do probably more. I have greater stamina than young women, probably half my age sometimes, because they've had to struggle with that much more. They've been in high pressure corporate jobs. They leave home in the morning. They will not probably have eaten their breakfast, probably not had the time to eat during the day. So there are these, multitude of these generational differences that have come in, that probably have are taxing the next generation, taxing them sometimes beyond their limits of endurance, is my fear and my concern. That's why the generational empathy, that you have to empathize with that generation, and hopefully that generation will empathize with you and not blame you for spoiling the rivers, and by for cutting down the trees and leaving them a world which they have to clean up. That's a painful. It's painful.
I think that blame, we will have to carry through, because I think they are doing it rightfully so. I think where planet is today, and and you are absolutely right. It is surprising how many of the today's generation are so conscientious about their own planet. I mean, it is just mind-boggling when they talk so passionately about energy, and which we, when we were growing up. I don't think it was in our list anywhere to be concerned about. We were, I think our spectrum was too narrow. I guess it could be the exposure, but yes, today's generation is something else altogether. I'm going to ask you something about the book. So, in your book, No Time to Be Young: 30 Insights into Generational Empathy from the Teenager, you talked about empathy, right? Could you elaborate on that empathy, and how will that help?
Yes. When I was deciding on the title of the book, I told myself that no time to be young works two ways. One, that these are not good times to be a young person is in. This is a too harsh and invasive a world to be young in. So there's no time to be young, and also they literally have no time to be young, because by teenage today starts
Too
at 10
hectic.
years. Yes,
Yeah.
too much is happening, too much is going on. So that's why I decided to call it No Time to Be Young. And empathy, again, what happens used to happen in the past, and it's happened with me. I know it happens with several other parents. Sonal, we are not prepared for a lot of changes that come crashing around us. So when those changes catch us by surprise, our reaction is stems from fear. Our reaction stems from a place of judgment, of criticism. For instance, I've had my daughters say that you say that you want us to be happy. Because every time I would say, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy. And the response would be no. You don't want us to be happy, just happy. You want us to be happy your way. So the catch is, I want you to be happy my way. I'm going to decide what being happy is. So when that when that when that happens, there is sorry, I broke my thought broke. There was
It's
a
okay. Please take your time.
yeah, yeah. So when I was saying that your reactions, when the reactions are coming from a lot of fear, which will lead to anger, and that leads to judgment, and again a lot of criticism, and this constant preoccupation with what will the family think, what will the neighbors think, what will the society think, what will the community say. But that is slowly now, I think, going more and more of us, this generation, are beginning to accept that there are some very fundamental changes. For instance, let's take, Sonal, a thing like your gender fluidity. A child today may not identify as just being a male or a female. They may identify as somewhere in between. Now
Absolutely.
that was a thought that didn't even occur to us because we lacked the vocabulary back then. But today that's not the case. So there are children who are at a very young age in school. They're comfortable talking about feeling a certain way, and they would like to express themselves. Now, what if the school reacted, or if the parents reacted with a clamp down, which can happen, which is likely to happen, which is happening, and then the backlash of all of that. So, so in short, what I'm trying to say in this book is that you stay now. It's time for us, Sonal, to for parents to stay ahead. You can't play catch up with the children. You've got to stay ahead. And that's the reason that I started writing a column for a magazine for the contemporary teacher. And that column is titled A Step Ahead. And the basic premise is that you anticipate. You have to stay informed. You anticipate that this can happen, this can happen, this can happen. This is what is happening around in the world. This is what these are the big ideas that are floating out there. And how could that affect the young? So the onus on a new parent is to stay relevant and to keep a little ahead and anticipate what could be coming. For instance, smart screen, good screen time, bad screen time, the significance of tattoos, consumption pattern in children, then your body image issues. Like I said, early teen relationships. These are things that could be happening. They're happening. But if you were able to anticipate, then you would at least be better prepared to guide your child, or at least provide the right kind of cushion. Yes.
Sometimes, actually, even so, one thing that I wanted to mention when you were talking about how these kids want to represent themselves, my daughter was sharing with me that in their school, uh, now that everything everything is on a Zoom session, in the first few classes when they were introducing themselves, they had to actually write he or she along with the name, so that the teacher knows how they want to be represented as. And when she shared that information with me, it took me a couple of minutes to understand what she was saying. I'm like, wow, it didn't even cross our mind, and I think it's brilliant to have that like gender fluidity, like you call it, and it's absolutely should be there. And it's your right. There is no assumptions anymore. It is your prerogative as to how you want to be represented as. So yeah, the other thing that you mentioned again was very relevant, is that the parents have to be ahead of the game, basically, because there's so much exposure to the kids. But this is where the struggle is, Neerja. How there's no manual, and you are, it's one of the most challenging things that parenting is one of the most challenging things, and we all agree on that. How do you stay ahead of the curve? How do you know? Because again, you are learning with your own experience on a daily basis, and you're questioning yourself, you're learning, so it's one of those very tricky situations that's currently this generation is at. Because like we said, generation Z on is they are on a different species altogether. How do you do that?
No, that's you're right. That's a tough thing to do. So what you will be doing, Sonal, is you will be constantly improvising on the spot, because
Yeah.
again, there's no blue book, there's no rule book. So it's a very painful process. But you improvise. Number one, stay on the ball, keep keep open to ideas, options, and don't lose sight of the bigger picture. The bigger picture. Always remember the bigger picture. That the bigger picture is, I don't want my child to lose that sense of connection with me. I want to retain that. The door outside must always be half open. The portico light has to be on. There has to be food, I mean, not literally, but in a manner, food outside. That your doors are always open to your child, no matter what. And these are the only two things you can do. You can improvise and not lose sight of the bigger picture. Because believe you me, believe you me, there are cases of estrangement happening between parents and children today. Again, unheard of with the earlier generation.
Right.
It wasn't who are who want to be themselves, who want to live their lives, who want to break free from the what they call, well, the typical Indian way of living, family's prestige, family for the sake of family's happiness. There are children who would like the freedom to be themselves without these expectations holding them back. But again, like I said, that if you're as a parent, you really need to be very, very large hearted and generous today. Keep your expectations minimal expectations. And yeah, the only way to put it is, you have to be a mighty parent today. A successful parent is a parent who's a mighty parent today. And a mighty parent, Sonal, is a parent who is able to get the help the child requires at the right time. Because there are it happens today because we don't want to acknowledge the difficulties sometimes that our children are going through. We don't want to acknowledge that our communication with them is not as good. Because which Indian mother or father wants to be considered a bad parent? Our identities are caught up in that.
So
My
correct. Yeah.
identity comes from being a good mother. If I ever got a whiff of a judgment that you've not been a good mother, my God, it's as though my living has come to a naught. So
Absolutely.
it's so important to all of us to be good parents. That's so important. And but again, like I said, it's not enough to be a parent anymore. You really have to be a mighty parent. And therefore, mighty parent is someone who realizes and is sensitive and alert to notice when the child is experiencing some problem, and to quickly get help without worrying about what people will say, or what, being judged. Because there are children who are going into depression, but their parents are not seeking help at the right time. So the decline gets worse, and you're hitting a point of no return sometimes. Sometimes you have your blinkers on. You just refuse to admit that the child has a substance problem, for instance. The child may be smoking up right under your nose in your home, and there is a you're delusional about it. You don't want to admit that the child needs help. And it's not rare today. It's clear and present and happening today. But a mighty parent today is somebody who, I believe, acknowledges it, steps up, seeks help, whatever help, whether it's from the community, extended family, from a professional, from a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. And here there is one thing, Sonal, that I feel very strongly about more and more. That people used to say once upon a time that it takes a village to raise a child. That saying, that belief has never been truer. It is truer today. It is
I
truer
agree.
today. You literally need a village to raise your child. So your child may not be comfortable with you. He or she may be comfortable with the mossy or the chachi or the coach or a teacher or a cousin. So what you do is you keep a circle around your child all the time. A circle of extended circle of a village or a family who have the child's concern at heart, who are the child's well-wisher, and not do this thing, try to do this alone, because it's the stakes are very high today. The stakes have never been higher, I believe. They've never been higher. Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that, I have come to the end of my questions. If there is anything that you would like to tell the audience, Neja, please go ahead.
No, Sunil, I think I've pretty much said it all. This is a topic which is so close to my heart. I could just go on and on and on. But very important to communicate with our children in their language. Just forget about your ego, forget about your expectations and your dreams. Forget about all that. Just get very real and in touch with the child, and be gentle. Be gentle, because young lives, precious lives, promising lives. You don't want those lives spiraling out of control. It would be such a huge, huge criminal waste. That empathy is what we owe our children. That empathy is what we owe them. Yes, Sonal.
Well, thank you so much, Neja, for being on the show. That was such a sensitive, yet, and sometimes, the generation gap is so out there, it's right there, and we don't register it. And I have before this show never associated empathy with the generation gap. So thank you so much for bringing that to the limelight, because you're absolutely right. No generation before needs more empathy than this one, because the exposure is on a different level and the struggle is on a different level. I feel. So that was a very, very meaningful, very relevant conversation to have. Thank you for being on the show. I thoroughly enjoyed having you over, and I'm pretty sure the audiences. I don't see any questions, so I think they're probably well satiated with whatever information has been given to them. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for joining in. See you again this coming Thursday on your online cafe. This is Jess Sonal signing off. Thank you, Nija, again. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye.